Welcome to the Future Christian Podcast, your source for insights and ideas on how to lead your church in the 21st century. At the Future Christian Podcast, we talk to pastors, authors, and other faith leaders for helpful advice and practical wisdom to help you and your community of faith walk boldly into the future. Whether you're a pastor, church leader, or a passionate member of your faith community, this podcast is designed to challenge, inspire, and equip you with the tools you need for impactful ministry. And now for a little bit about the guest for this episode.
Welcome to the Future Christian Podcast. Today, Martha Tatarnic welcomes Brian E. Pearson to the show. Brian is a former Anglican priest who for almost 40 years knew both the sublime and the ridiculous of the church world, often loving it, sometimes hating it, but eventually leaving to follow his own path. He is the author of How the Light Gets In, Passion Tide, and Pie Face Boy. He is a member of the Writers Guild of Alberta and the Alexandra Writers Center Society. A singer-songwriter, Pearson is also the producer and host of The Mystic Cave, a podcast that explores the elements, both new and ancient, of an emerging contemporary spirituality. He lives in Calgary, Alberta, with his wife, Jean, close to his 3 grown children and 2 granddaughters. A reminder before we start today's conversation, please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, and share Future Christian with a friend. You can connect with Lauren, Martha, and Future Christian on Instagram. We really appreciate your voice and how we faithfully discern the future of the church.
Welcome to the Future Christian Podcast. I'm your host for today's episode, Martha Tatarnic, and I'm really happy today to be joined by Brian Pearson. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you, Martha. It is a great pleasure to be here. This is the first podcast interview I've done since the book's come out, so this is exciting for me.
Oh my gosh, well, that's really exciting. Thank you for making Future Christian first stop on your podcast tour.
Yeah, you bet.
That's amazing. We were talking just before the show began and noting that although we have never met one another in person, we have a million people in common and have been Facebook friends for a long time. That's how the Anglican world works, is that
very small.
We're very connected to one another. Anyway, it's great to have this face-to-face time with you right now and to be talking about your book. So before we get into your book, let's just have a couple of opening questions so that our listeners get a bit of a sense of you and who you are. Maybe you could just share a little bit about your faith journey, what it has looked like in the past and what it looks like now. Broad brush strokes.
Sure. So I am cradle Anglican, church-going family, which was significant to me and I think to the whole family because we moved a lot back and forth across Canada. And the church became the way we kind of settled into every new community. So it was a very kind of familial thing that we would get to know the local community and the church would be our portal. So church has always been part of my life, part of my history, part of my blood. Wherever I am at now, I think I'd like an Anglican funeral when I go. So, but along the way, through the church, I was introduced in the days of the Jesus People movement to evangelical charismatic Christianity, and that was a hoot. That was quite a wild ride, where apart from sort of delighting in the power and presence of the Holy Spirit, we were also judging everyone, like, my own parents for not being Christian, having brought me up in church. So had that experience. Went to an Anglo-Catholic divinity school, which is Trinity College, and those in the Canadian church will recognize I had another option. Right across the street was Wycliffe College, and that's the evangelical college, and that's where I should have gone. Except part of me, and this is just part of me, I kept thinking about, but I know nothing about the Anglo-Catholic Church. That's a mystery to me, so why don't I go there?
Yeah.
So I went there, Anyway, I ended up being ordained, was in active ministry for almost 40 years, loved the work, grew to be deeply disillusioned with working within the church. And by the time I retired, without slamming any doors, I left the church. I just never went back. The first Easter came and went. The first Christmas came and went. And I kept thinking inwardly, like looking inwardly of, shouldn't I be going to church? And there was nothing in me that wanted me to. So clearly a level of disaffection had settled upon me, and I've spent the last 6.5 years exploring all of the spiritual avenues that I felt were not available to me while I was preaching the one way. And it's been a fabulous ride. I still think of myself as a follower of Jesus, but I rarely have gone to church. And when I have, I know too much. I can't be uncritical. I sit in the pews going, that was a dog of a sermon. I mean, we've all come out to hear, and this was last Christmas Eve, we've all come out to hear the word of God in this sacred place. The music's great. And you have no sermon for us other than, gee, it's hard to preach about Christmas. Like, I can't turn off the inner critic when I go to church. So I'm finding other ways, other communities. And anyway, that's broad strokes what my journey has been.
So basically, you have covered a lot of spiritual terrain.
I think so, yeah.
You've kind of done the whole gamut of Anglicanism and beyond.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. So, right now, as somebody who isn't part of a Christian church, is there a spiritual practice that has become particularly meaningful for you in the last few years?
Yes, several things. Although, like with any spiritual practice, if I tell you what I'm doing, I'll be judged as a hypocrite, because practices come and go, and you're good at them, then you're bad at them, and you remember them, and you go back. But I do every morning. I do about a half-hour stretching exercise, and it was developed purely to strengthen my core, to protect my lower back, because I have lower back issues. But the more that my body has become a part of, my spiritual path, that morning stretch time has become like a spiritual exercise. It's almost, there were times it's almost like dance, where I'm moving from one movement to the next, and they all have a purpose in terms of my strengthening my core, but there's something else going on there that I quite love. I also do I honor the 4 directions and have my own kind of ritual around that at the conclusion of it. Even more hypocritically, I got to get out in nature. I've spent the whole summer almost indoors, so trying to sell this book and attending to all the stuff about starting up my own podcast for a new season. And I've either been indoors or in the car, but when I can get out in the natural world, that's become a part of my spiritual discipline. And not just going for a hike in the mountains, because we're close to the mountains here, but going on what I would call wild wanders. You leave the path and you go with intention and wonder what the natural world has for you. I'll just add 2 more things, but just briefly. One is, I nurture a very wide network of fellow seekers who have become my new community. Because I don't think you can do this spiritual journey without feeling a part of some community. So I nurture that. I spend a lot of time with people individually and in small groups. And apart from that, if there's something about the spiritual discipline of being present that has totally grasped me. So just paying attention to, where is the divine in this moment? Where is the divine in our conversation? What's coming up from the inside that I want to pay attention to? It's that sacrament of the present moment, that I try to cultivate. That's pretty broad too, though, isn't it, that whole? I
mean, certainly I wouldn't define anything on that list as hypocritical. I'm not I feel like
Well, I
those
don't
are
always
some...
do it.
Oh, that's the hypocritical part. I see. Okay.
I love to get out in nature, yeah, and it's been 2 months since I've had a good walk in nature. So,
I see.
hypocrite.
Okay. Okay. Right. But yes, I understand the way that writing books is one thing and selling them is another thing.
No kidding. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think all of that gives us a really good platform from which to jump into your book, Talking to Trees, A Journey into Soul. And there's a lot in this book. I've kind of focused my questions and our conversation today around church leadership. And, you have a wealth of experience in church leadership. But I think we'll touch on a lot of different things that people will find interesting. So your book starts by you talking about standing outside of a church, watching people coming out and wanting to ask them questions about why they're there and what they're looking for and what message they heard and where they expect to encounter God. Quite a fascinating list of questions, especially on your way out of a church rather than on your way into a church.
Right.
But what has the role of the church been in your spiritual journey, Brian?
So I feel oddly tremendous gratitude for the role the church has played in my life, and that I think it provided for me a kind of container for all of my spiritual curiosity until the container became too small. But in the early days, like as I say, as a family, going to church was like going home, even if we were we'd moved to a brand new community. So there was a sense of belonging that I could just take for. In some ways, I talk about this with some of my friends in ministry, that it was very easy to find myself drawn to ordained ministry because I already felt this was my community. What's my role within this community? It didn't occur to me to think outside of the community, other than I was singing songs and trying to get recorded, and there was a part of me that wanted to explore being a musician. So actually, I quit divinity school for a year to explore that, and it was fun and disastrous at the same time. I just met so many broken musicians who were playing in bars and in Holiday Inn hotels. I just realized, okay, that's not my vocation. But there was something about the familial sense of the church where it contained me in a very creative way. But I had a guest on my own podcast a couple of years ago who named something that was quite shocking. He's a Christian mystic and a lovely man, deep in his faith. And I asked him about church going, about himself. Because he had said something off mic that sounded kind of critical. So I just said, so what's church going like for you? And he said, and then I think regretted saying it, he said, church going seems to be geared for the beginners. And that as he grew deeper in his faith, and in his case, it was the mystic side of Christianity, so contemplation, meditation, church going felt like it was all container and no invitation. It wasn't an invitation to grow bigger and beyond. And when he said that, I mean, it stuck with me because I thought, yes, that was my experience, that the church was a wonderful container until it felt like it was holding me back from a natural curiosity that led me to want to explore all sorts of spiritual truths and experiences and practices on the edges of our faith. And the church doesn't like you to go there. So communing with the dead, yeah, not so much. The church talks a lot about the communion of saints, but don't actually try to connect with one and have a conversation with one, because that just gets too spooky. In our church here in Calgary, we once hosted a weekend workshop about death and dying. But it was not about the Christian view of death and dying. We talk about that every week. It was anecdotally people who work in hospice, people who are spiritualists, who facilitate conversations with dead people. We had all these people come and give a presentation about what actually happens in death, quite apart from what we believe about death. This, to me, was where the church ought to be pushing out the bounds. We could do this, but we had to do it secretively so that my bishop wouldn't know until afterwards that we had done this. And I thought, that's not right. So anyway, as a container, when I needed it, the church was great. And then as my curiosity and interest began to deepen and grow, the container was actually an impediment.
Yeah. I find it interesting, the pieces of those 40 years in parish leadership and kind of the lifelong participation in the life of the church. I think it's interesting the parts that you have brought forward into the edges of our Christian faith, particularly your note around the importance of community, the importance of one another's stories, of not trying to do this alone or forge this alone. But yeah, there are some boundaries that are always being pushed at. You know, if you look at the church that is today, it's quite different than it was a couple of generations ago. But a lot of people get their eyebrows singed off as they, sort of nudge at those boundaries.
But so I was thinking about. There's one of the details of the early part of Jesus' ministry that I think we brush over is when he was ready to start his earthly ministry, he did not go to the Jewish establishment in Jerusalem. He knew that was a non-starter. He hadn't gone to the right schools. They would not acknowledge. He was an itinerant preacher from nowhere. He knew that the core of his religious community could not give him the validation or affirmation that he would have wanted, even if it was just ceremonial, so that he could begin his ministry. So he went out to John the Baptist, who was truly, literally an eccentric. He was off-center. It sounds personally a little off-center, but also off-center culturally. He was out on the edges. And that's where Jesus went, as if that's the only place new life can be identified, can be recognized, at the edges. Because what happens at the core, and then talking about the church, what happens in the core is that we become by nature very conservative. Our view is, like when we ordain a bishop, one of the functions of a bishop is defender of the faith. I'm thinking, give me a break. If this faith is so fragile, it needs a human being to defend it. It's not worthy. It's not worthy of us. We don't have to defend this. We have a great mythic story that we need to tell and ritualize and all the things that the church does well. But new life is always going to come from the edges. And usually that's exactly where the church doesn't want to go. It says, well, I don't know, that's a little woo-woo. Yeah, maybe that's a little woo-woo, and that's maybe exactly where we need to go. Maybe we should be talking to dead people a little bit more. Or whatever's out there on the edge.
Well, I think that's beautiful, and very apt to point out where Jesus' ministry begins, and who he begins it with as well. I mean, he really does sort of go to the highways and the byways and invite the stragglers to be part of starting this with him. So, really. Really good wisdom there. I want to say, Brian, I want our listeners to get some good plugs for your book, because it is so readable. It's just, you're never just taking a point and, sort of breaking it down. You're telling stories every step of the way.
Yeah.
And then little nuggets emerge from those stories. It kind of always starts story-based. And of course, what struck me the most, as a person in Christian leadership, were the parish stories, the stories of the people that you meet along the way in parish ministry. Yeah. And I think that you do a beautiful job of being really honest and also joyful and loving about those people and about those communities, and not just what you taught them, but what you learned from them.
Thank you. Yeah.
I think people who are in the trenches right now in parish ministry are just going to really have a lot of points of connection to those stories, because they're beautiful and they're funny and they're poignant and they're a little uncomfortable at times, and their honesty, all the things, right?
Thank you. Thank you for that. Because isn't that really where the rubber hits the road? Like, even though the last 10 years of my ministry, or less than that, I was in constant conflict with my bishop, and that colored everything, because our bishop would not permit same-sex blessings, let alone marriages, as the only urban diocese in the country. And we were a downtown church, lots of gay people, lots of people from across the spectrum in our parish. So increasingly, it became a difficult and in the end untenable context within which to do the ministry. But as you're saying, the relationships with the people, that's where, so whatever conflict I had with the bishop in the end did not matter when it came to my people, except actually when we began to lose some people who said, I can't belong to a denomination that's this backward. And it broke my heart, right?
Yeah.
But otherwise, it's those relationships that you're referring to, those are the things where lives get changed.
Yeah, and if that's not where the rubber hits the road, then count me out.
Yeah. Yeah.
If it doesn't get embodied in real people's lives, if it's just ideas and teachings,
correct theology, correct practice. Well, at some point, nobody cares. Make it real or go home.
Yeah, make it real. And actually, we don't have to make it real. We just need to pay attention. It is real. It's happening, just pay attention.
Yeah.
So when you look back over those 40 years in ministry, what would you say was most life-giving about serving in church?
Well, certainly what you just identified, the privilege of being allowed into people's lives. That was number one. Even as a young priest, I was inexperienced, didn't know what I was doing. And because I was ordained, I was playing a role. I got invited into people's lives, into the I mean, early on, my second parish, I buried a 14-year-old who had died of leukemia.
Oh.
And, it was beyond my own life experience. And it just was a horrific experience. At the same time, the privilege of journeying with her, with Jennifer, and then with her parents in the years that followed. I just remember, who gets to do this? It was solemn, difficult work, and it demanded something of me to show up without being trite and without so the privilege of traveling with people has just been enormous. And interestingly, a friend of mine who's a deacon in the church here said to me a little while ago, she said, Brian, you haven't left your ministry. You're still doing all the things that you do. And it's true. I had to think, I see a lot of people for coffee. And I realized that pastoral ministry has continued under another umbrella where they're not seeing me because I'm their priest. We're just tracking each other. So that I have to say, and not just because I went to an Anglo-Catholic college, I loved the liturgy. I loved that there was a communal ritual that carried us through an experience. And all we had to do was prepare the ground for it. I used to say this to people when we were working on liturgies together. I'd say, Our job is to create the preconditions for an encounter with the holy, with God. Our job is not to make that encounter happen. We cannot make it happen. But if we do the right preparation and then step out of the way and everyone just do their job, just perform your job, an encounter is possible. And obviously, I can feel myself getting impassioned about it. I still believe it, that a well-done liturgy, a ritual that connects with people's experience, it's like, even as the priest, I wasn't running it. I was part of it. I was swept along. And now, as you know, there's parts you have to pay attention to where you're working. I'd never felt like worship in the same way as when I could worship at some other church or when someone else was presiding or preaching. But it did feel like an enormous privilege. And I loved to preach.
Yeah.
I like words, and especially once I began storytelling rather than lecturing. There's a chapter in the book about that where I began recognizing, hey, Jesus never gave a lecture in his life. He told stories. What am I doing lecturing people about correct theology? When that happened, preaching became a whole lot more fun. And because sometimes there'd be times in the middle of the sermon, I'd go off and tell a story because it really seemed that was a story that needed to be told, finish it, and have no idea where I was in the sermon. And the congregation grew to love it because they would see the look on my face and I'd go, okay, I have no idea where we are right now. And then have to kind of find our way back. So all of that, deep privilege and a lot of fun.
Yeah. And, that liturgy piece, that certainly is the container as well that you talk about, that can be pretty vast. It can be a pretty vast container.
Yes,
and I'm, I'll have these moments when I'm leading liturgy and I just little things are not going well and I'm feeling myself irritated or worried or whatever. And if I can just stop and pray for a moment, please God, despite all of the stuff that isn't quite going the way I want, can just please show up for people, please just let people have an encounter.
Yeah.
And that's that kind of getting out of the way piece that you have to do on a pretty regular basis because it's a human offering. And
that's right. Our egos attach to those roles and we want it to go well. And that's
of
fair
course.
enough. I remember though, in my church in Oakville, we started offering the laying out of hands during the Eucharist. And because that was a parish that had the Order of St. Luke was influential in its culture. So we started doing the laying out of hands, and we did everything we could not to make it Pentecostal. We wanted it to be Anglican. So we had, a routine of how people indicate they wanted the laying on of hands when they came up to the altar. And but I remember we went through it, and so we started doing that. And I would often feel I'm doing my job. This is my Sunday morning gig, and now I'm laying hands on people, and I have these words that I say, and I'm sincere in this moment. I feel nothing. I'm just doing what we've offered to do. And I remember this parishioner, this woman, Kathy, who came up to me afterwards and said, whoa, wasn't that incredible? Did you feel that?
Yeah.
No. She had this incredible experience of opening. That was opening her body up, opening everything up when I had done the laying on of hands. I felt nothing. I was probably thinking, oh, okay, this is going on too long. Oh, can we clip the end of the service a bit? Who knows where my head was?
Yeah, truly.
We just did it. And in doing it, something was happening in spite of us. I always remember that, it doesn't matter. It's not about me.
It's not about me.
Yeah. If I do a piece of ministry that is particularly effective, okay, I'm a functionary here, and I just have to be open to the Spirit, and I may or may not. So I didn't get the buzz she got.
Yeah. No, I think that's a pretty constant thing that we have to keep track of is how it isn't ultimately about us. Yeah. A lot of our guests, a lot of our listeners are in the thick of church leadership right now. And, we have a lot of conversations around burnout and
Yes.
around kind of the stresses of ministry. You named already like just a lot of ongoing conflict with the institutional church, but what would you say, or would you say that there was anything in particular about parish ministry that took a toll, along with all of those amazing things that are certainly true too?
Well, some of this is very much on me. If I'm passionate about something, like as I mentioned, I've spent the whole summer trying to sell books. It's been like I've missed opportunities to go hiking, to do all sorts of other things. I'm in this particular zone, and I get pretty, it's not OCD, but it is sort of, I do get compulsive. So, and I loved my work. So what took the greatest toll on me, I think, was a kind of burnout of, I would work until I had nothing left. And when it was interesting, when I was in your part of the world and I was in Oakville, once a month I learned to take a 1-day retreat, overnight, 1-day, full-day retreat at the Sisters of the Church, who had a convent at that point in Oakville.
Yeah.
And it was my attempt just to say, every so often, I have to stop. I have to get off this train. So I found that to be, and it makes me critical, in much like the old guy looking back, looking at a new generation who are very concerned to get their time off. And I remember the assistant curate who wanted Christmas off because it would be the last time that he would have Christmas, with his thing. No, you should have thought of that before you went into this line of work, pal. I don't understand it, because when I see clergy being really, really protective of their personal time, I get it, because I wasn't.
Right.
At the same time, it's like, this isn't a job. This isn't a 40-hour week job. This is like your life. And yes, you have to put, safeguards around your family time and your personal time. Yes, all that. But anyway, that in the end, I was quite given to exhaustion. And I could tell coming out of every summer after my vacation, I'd get into September at this time of year, and I'd be grumpy as hell because I had to gear up. I had to rev up for a whole new season of programs, and I just kind of wanted to go back to bed.
Yeah.
The other thing, though, was how much my conflict with the bishop took out of me. I hate conflict, and I just felt he was so wrong, and it was entirely the wrong message for the church to be giving the wider world, that we see same-sex relationships as subpar and whatever. I mean, all the language he never used, but it was all implied by his actions. And there were 6 of us, 6 clergy, who defied him and did an irregular wedding ceremony. And technically, you could say it was of 2 women, but one of them was trans, and so it got very confusing who's getting married here. But it's like, I didn't care. And they had come to us wanting a church wedding. So we gave it to them knowing what would happen, and it did. He called us into his office and threatened that we do that again, we're all going to be fired. That was very stressful for me.
Oh, yeah.
I hated that level. And unfortunately, it got personal, because I got so angry that he was compromising my ability to do the job I thought I was supposed to be doing, that I wrote him some pretty nasty letters, and I hope he's burned them. I hope that those are not in my file somewhere, because I couldn't find a way to be charitable with someone who had power over me in that way. That was very hard. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, thank you for just being candid about those different pieces, because I think such an important part of this podcast is to provide an honest space for people who are wrestling with all of those ups and downs of ministry on a daily basis. And, whether it's conflict in the parish or conflict within the institution, there really is no way of like standing for something without getting into the crossfire here and there. And Jesus has quite a few words about warning us about that reality. So, but it does take its toll. It really does.
Yeah.
And
in the end, I think that is, I couldn't have named it, but in the end, when I left, it wasn't like I'm never going back to church. It was not that. I just thought, let's see. Because I'd had that premonition. I write about that in the book of an actual voice that, spoke to me saying, when you're done, you'll be gone, or, when you go, you'll be done. And so I realized, no, I really am done. So it had taken a toll beyond just in the moment. It took a toll that I no longer wanted to be associated with the institution, at least in this part of the world. I think if I'd been in another diocese somewhere else that could have affirmed the good work I felt that we were doing in my parish, that may not have been true. But in this part of the world, it was like, no, I really am done. And that's a big cost.
Well, let's dig into that a little bit more. Not just the toll, but where your ministry took you, because the other part that I really hear in your book isn't just about the toll, it's about the journey. And by the time you got to the end of 40 years, you were in a very different place than when you started. Yeah. You articulate a lot of curiosity that led you into a lot of conversations with like a Wiccan high priest,
yes.
and with spiritualists, and with thinking about orbs and where the dead actually are, and how we communicate with them, and all of those kinds of things that took place within the context of parish ministry. What did you kind of feel like was important in those conversations that you were modeling as a Christian leader? Because I don't feel like it was as something outside of parish ministry that you were doing. I feel like it was out of being a Christian leader that you ended up in these different places.
I so appreciate you saying that. I think my contention grew because of my natural curiosity that we don't have the whole story. The church doesn't. We have our story, and that's fair. We should tell our story, but we don't have the whole story. And so in regards to communing with the dead, the church, in Leviticus it says, we shouldn't be consorting with the spirits of the dead. And then what happens, the very core of the Christian story is the disciples consorting with the dead man, Jesus. It's sort of like if they had been taking seriously Leviticus, they would have said when Jesus reappeared, we're not allowed to talk to you.
Right.
So it felt to me, by being so protective, and in that protectiveness fearful of the edges of our Christian experience, that we were selling the story short. I don't know that churches should be having spiritualist meetings where they're talking to dead people, but they shouldn't be afraid of them.
Well, you know
right?
what? Let me just share a little anecdote with you, because I think this is really relevant. A colleague of mine did, a thesis for, I think, her Master of Theological Studies, and she did it on experiences that people in our churches have had with those who have died. So like encounters of some kind. And she found in her research that like the vast majority of people in our churches have had some kind of encounter, like maybe 75% or something. Yes. But they almost never talk to their parish priest about it.
That's right.
But if you go digging, almost like 3 out of 4 people have had an experience. So yeah, why wouldn't we be talking about that? Like, why wouldn't that, like, of all places, a faith community, why wouldn't it be like totally important to talk about how you make sense of that and what that means and how it feels and how it gives hope and, all of those things, like.
Because it is people's experience. If you address it and acknowledge it, people will love you for that. they'll say, I go to this great church, where they actually talk about my experience, as opposed to those 75% going, I go to a really good church where I can't tell them actually that I just, had a visit with my dead father. Also, in another one, but I do think the church is moving in this direction. Part of my post-ministry explorations has been around what I would call the area of animism, where what does it mean that God is invested in the creation that God made? Like present in this creation. When I go on these wild wanders, it is with the expectation that God is going to show up. I don't use that language so much anymore myself, but that's really what I'm looking for, that God is in the natural world. And if I am open to that as I am to God being present in other people and in rituals that are important, what does God have to tell me through the natural world? Now, the church traditionally has been very suspicious of that. I mean, they've given it a name, animism, of something which is tantamount to heresy. Yet, it's like, what is to prevent us from celebrating the God who is in creation? We're not saying God isn't in Jesus, isn't in the church, but out there in the edges, people are encountering the divine in all sorts of ways. And if the church isn't naming those, if the church isn't embracing them, isn't even recognizing them, what relevance does the church have to modern day seekers? Like, people are finding God without that language in the natural world.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's not even just a question of what it says about seekers or to seekers. I think you've named this already. Like, it is, what are we saying about God? Like, are we really, like, inviting people to know the God that they can only know, like, on Sunday mornings in this particular space? Like, is that the invitation? Like,
yeah,
it's a pretty limited invitation.
Well, very, and we wonder why people aren't attracted to the church, and why. You probably found the same thing. Whenever clergy end up like in murder mysteries, like as a character, they're either crazy or they're the one who did it. Like, like the world doesn't have any positive images of clergy, it seems, which is, I think, is sort of symptomatic of the modern world doesn't know what to do with the church at all, because we don't seem to be part of the modern world. So there's something about embracing the spiritual search of our age. It doesn't mean not telling our story. And here's the thing I'd want to say. The church should feel proud and privileged to tell its mythic story. It's got a beautiful mythic story. A creator, right? A creator who so loves what the creator has made that is willing to suffer to bring in the creation to their fold. Like, there's just this lovely sense of even Jesus' death on the cross, if not understood as atonement, as having to make up because we're all really bad children who need to be punished. So Jesus gets punished for us, which I think is, okay, that may have worked in some generation. That doesn't work now. But as part of the mythic story of this is how far the creator was willing to go to bring us back. Like, it's a beautiful story. So it's a beautiful story. It's an honest story. It talks about the things that actually happen, like suffering and death actually happen. Like, that is the human condition, right? So, like, what resources do we have for dealing with suffering and death? Because going to be on the table. It's baked into the story. So we can celebrate the story that we have to tell. And when I say celebrate, preach it, build our liturgies around it. I think all of that's important. But it's not then to say we've got the whole story. No, we don't. This is our story. We want to tell it. We want the world to know it. But it's not the only thing going on. And therefore, we can learn. I mean, one of the things I've done since I've started this great safari, spiritual safari, was get to know the shamanistic traditions. I mean, I've met my spirit guides and my power animals. Like, I can't imagine that happening in church. But as I've tried to process it, it makes sense. It makes sense that in the imaginal world, we open ourselves to a world of mystery, that in the church we think about angels, but we don't want to get too literal about it. Maybe we should. Maybe we should get literal about angels. But there are experiences that if we're able to acknowledge them, even if we don't go there, even if we don't embrace them, will help our people, because it's naming something they already know. So I'm hesitating getting into any great depth about shamanism, but I do have theories. Actually, let me share, and then you can cut this out if you want. Here's what I think. In the Ignatian spiritual tradition, often the imagination is engaged in meditation, right? And so, for instance, someone meditating in that tradition would call to mind or read a scene from the Gospels, and they would imagine in great detail all the sensory details. What did it smell like? Was it hot? Was it cold? Who were you? Were you a member of the crowd? Were you one of the disciples? Were you Jesus? All the things to invest yourself with your imagination. You're playing. And then when you enter the story, and I used to do Ignatian meditation as my own daily practice, once you start to enter a story, there's a point where you let go and you're no longer making it happen. There is something happening in that meditation that you didn't plan. Somebody turns and says something to someone else. Someone does something. Where did that come from, if not from the depths, where we might say inspired by the presence of God within? What I discovered about shamanism, it's the same thing. It's so the shaman beats a drum, and it's at a very fast pace. It all helps to change the brain waves, but ultimately it's all about opening to that imaginal participation in the universe, where I'm going to just let my imagination carry me. That is frowned upon in the modern age, in the scientific age. And yet, I think all so-called primitive peoples used their imagination all the time and found there was always a point where something was breaking through that you didn't plan.
Right.
This isn't your thought. This isn't your idea. And when that happens, there's the gift. You don't try to go back and analyze it. You take the gift because, like a dream, I'm going to live into this somehow. And I had tons of experiences like that I thought, how would you cultivate that in church? And maybe that's with silence. Maybe that's with meditation in church. Maybe that's with, remember, we brought a big meditation bowl into our worship, but we never capitalized on it. Like, we would ring it just before we started the proclamation of the words, so we're all kind of, but I thought you could have a 3-minute sit after the sermon where nothing happens, so people are following their imagination. I don't know, that's, you know what I mean? There's those things which we have pushed to the edges as being way too out there for Christians. They're not. They're part of our tradition too.
Yeah, they're not. It's not without a lot of common ground, as you're naming. Yeah. Okay. Well, far be it for me to tell you what the thesis of your book is, but as I was reading your book, I came to page 49, and I just want to read this quotation because it, for me, encapsulated a lot about what you were trying to say. So you're in a pastoral conversation with someone who has had some faith experiences, I think, in a more charismatic tradition.
He was being wooed by the Mormons.
The Mormons, okay.
Yes.
And so you were kind of just inviting him to reflect on what he may or may not be experiencing there. And you say, I think we have to ask ourselves at any given crossroads, which way will make our lives larger rather than smaller? God has a big plan for us that demands all the openness we can muster. If a particular way is going to restrict us to make us smaller than we are, or asks us to be closed rather than open, we have to ask if that's really where our soul wants to go. Do we want to live large or live small? So to me, that was like kind of how I would define the book. What do you think it looks like to live large rather than small?
By the way, I think that was very astute of you to pick that out, because as you read it, I go, yeah, that was really the core somewhere in there. I think there's something almost very biblical about it. Every time an angel appears in the Bible, they say, "Do not fear. Don't be afraid. There's nothing. There's nothing to fear here, and therefore we can live large because God is out at the edges. God is beyond the edges. God is in the hinterlands. God is at the core. Like, this is not a God who can be easily circumscribed in any way. So living large is wherever you are, being open to the presence of God there. And then when the circumstances change, be open to the presence of God. Oh, over here too. On my own podcast, I invited 3 people to come and talk. My intention was all of them have had experience with darkness in their practice. So one was the shaman, Wade the shaman. One was a spiritualist who communes with dead people. And one was a Reiki master. All of them I knew from personal conversations had experience with the dark side, right? And I thought, well, at some point we should have a conversation about that. So I brought them all together in my little studio and asked them probing questions. None of them were interested in talking about the dark side. What came out was, we know it's there, but you don't go there. We're not doing this work we're doing for the dark side. A person can get all messed up and lost if that's where they want to go. So they almost, I don't know how conscious they were of this, but it's like they didn't know each other until they were talking. But there's like a pact of, we're not going to talk about the dark side, because they were all given to the light, to they're very different. Their practices being about healing, about restoration, about health and wholeness. So I think there's an attitude in that says they weren't afraid of the darkness. And the stories they had told me other than that, I knew that in each case, it was like, well, this has no power here, because they were so invested in the light. If we're really people of faith, then we have nothing to fear. And we can move out to the expansive places where otherwise the church might go, I'm not sure you should go there. You know what? If it's going haywire, if things are turning dark, you'll know it. So there's something about being fearless. If that's I'm just riffing on this, but that feels right to me.
I mean, a
fearless.
word that I find I use a lot in my sermons is courage.
Yes.
I do think that there's a lot about being called to courage. And if we think again about those like basic human realities of suffering and death, I think a lot of what we're doing is equipping people to be courageous.
That is so true.
In the face of like what life will throw at us.
Yeah. And what death will throw at us, to be able to think of someone who's lived a faithful life, whose faith has given them the gift of courage in the face of death, on their deathbed, not out of their skin with worry and anxiety, but wow, this is going to be a really cool journey. Wow, what's the other side going to be like? As much as I may be sad about leaving my loved ones and all that, like this, I've spent my whole life preparing to go through this portal. Like, wouldn't that be I'm getting chills actually just talking about that. I think you're right.
Yeah, and I mean, we do get to witness that, right? Like, we do get to witness people who die beautifully and not without suffering, but who die with curiosity and gratitude and trust and all of those things. Like, it's quite inspiring.
Very inspiring. And as clergy, we have been privileged, right, to be at the bedside and to see that and go, oh man, as sad as I will be when I breathe my last breath, because I quite love this life. And I'm loving it in retirement in this particular phase. This is marvelous. As sad as I'll be, I also hope I'll be excited.
Yeah.
about what's coming next.
Yeah, truly. Okay, I feel like you've kind of answered this already, but I do want to just circle back to what your relationship is with the church now, and how you kind of see it in your spiritual life now, or if you do.
So it's no longer part of my spiritual practice, but I know without a doubt it's in my bones, which is why I say, I can imagine. I've said that to my wife. I've said, if I go before you, in spite of being out here in the hinterlands, I want a good old Anglican funeral. That's me. I mean, that's where, as much as I try not to pay attention to gossip and what's happening in the church, in my own parish and in the diocese since I've left, I'm still capable of being hurt by hearing of things happening. It hurts my heart. And I think, no, you don't close down in terms of the church as it gets smaller and it gets fearful and it circles the wagons and it's all about, as we said, defending the faith. No. So I know that at some spiritual level, I will always be a part of the church. But it's not so much. I haven't found a way to make that work, of being a part of a church. I would want to go back and be a part of my own church, right? The people I know so well. And that's bad form for a priest to hang out. And I don't think always it's very welcome by the newer clergy who follow you. So
I mean, I have really a different opinion about that, because I have been so lucky in my church ministries to have my predecessors continue to hang around and just be extremely wonderful parts of the community. So I know that's not everybody's experience, but I don't know. I feel like a lot of the boundaries that we've put up around friendships having to come to a close the minute that you
that's craziness.
It just doesn't seem to bear out with reality. But again, I'm speaking from a particular context of having really great predecessors in all of my churches.
There's something very organic about that. There's something natural, but the elders still stay with us.
I know.
They're not leading anymore except by a certain example.
Oh, it's been so good for me. I've loved it. But, I know it can be toxic too. Oh, and the other thing I just wanted to note is I do feel like you've taken the church with you to where you are now too. That maybe you're not attending a church, but it just everything that we've talked about today, everything that's in your book, it is still with you.
Yeah.
In a big way.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah. So, what do you hope that a reader, and especially those serving in Christian ministry now, what do you hope they might take away from your book, Talking to Trees?
I think, one, I hope that it would be read as an invitation. And going back to what you read from the book, an invitation to live your faith large. And an invitation by way of the storytelling that I really do think that the power of storytelling is I may be telling you a story, and halfway through the telling of my story, you're already going, that happened to me once. It evokes a story that we are landing on something that feels true, that it's profound. And it's not like we both believe the same thing. We both have the same experience. So the invitation is by way of hearing the stories, not for their own sake, as if my life is any more interesting than anyone else's, but hearing the stories for the stories that get evoked within the reader. And I mean, I was saying to someone, thinking of having this conversation, I said, I think the whole purpose of writing the book, I'm realizing, wasn't about the book. It was about the conversations that can come out of the book, the storytelling that can happen. And I'll be part of some of those conversations. Most of them I won't be. I would love that. If someone could read the book and feel invited to go, yeah, there's something here that I had a similar experience, and down they're going that road, acknowledging and even celebrating their own spiritual journey in all its uniqueness. It may or may not fit into the church, but yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that is going to happen for people reading the book because there's a lot that's relatable, but there's also a lot that is, your unique person of Brian Pearson and your particular viewpoint and way of seeing the world. And I think that particularity invites other people to be more particular themselves too. So it's like the universal and the specific.
I love it. And that's a whole conversation of its own. But you know what? Joseph Campbell, who used to write about follow your bliss, he was the mythologist who was trying to summarize the world myths. He says, really, it's all about following your bliss. Before he came up with that, he told his friend Thomas Moore, he said, he was talking about follow your weird, W-Y-R-D. It's an old English word that means fate, follow your fate. But I love it even better. Like he should have said, follow your weird, because if each of us is going on our own path, we're going to be weird. We're going to be like John the Baptist, a little eccentric, like that's the way we're meant to be.
Yeah, there's a great Rachel Held Evans quote where she says, like, I don't want the church to be more hip. I want the church to be more weird.
I can see that's it. That's exactly
right?
it.
Like, yeah, just lean in. Lean into the weird. Okay, well, let's take a quick break and then we'll come back with some closing questions. Welcome back to the Future Christian Podcast, and I continue to be here with Brian Pearson, and we are going to wrap up with our usual closing questions. Now, Brian, we always tell our guests that you can take these questions seriously or not. It's up to you, the degree of seriousness that you apply to your answers. But here they are.
Okay,
Brian. If you were Pope for a day, what would fill out those 24 hours?
I'd set the captives free.
Do you want to elaborate there?
On the whole church, I'd say, folks, do what you want. Have a good time. Go out there and explore, and see you tomorrow. And tomorrow, we'll get back to usual. But today, do what you want to do. Set the Christian captives free for a day.
All right. That is a very on-brand answer, Brian. Okay. What theological or historical, Christian or otherwise figure would you want to meet or bring back to life?
Well, ever since reading in John Philip Newell's book, Sacred Earth, Sacred Soul, about Pelagius, Pelagius, who was given a terrible, terrible ride by the Mediterranean Church in the 4th and 5th centuries.
Yeah, like he has a heresy named after him, doesn't he?
Exactly. And we think we know nothing about him, but John Philip Newell dug into it. And what a cool dude. He was a Welsh monk who had a bad haircut. And when he went to Rome to not confront, but to be with the Mediterranean Church, they saw this hick. He had what was essentially a Druid haircut. And it was sort of in style about 10 years ago. Young guys would have the sides and backs of their hair, cut right down to their scalp. And then it'd be long on top. It wasn't the monkish tonsure of the Mediterranean Church. But he was earth-based in his theology. He was blessing-based in his understanding of creation. It's not about sin. It's about we were put on earth as a blessing. And the whole Christian message is to draw us back to be that blessing. Nothing wrong with that. He consorted. Can you believe this? He consorted with women in his company. He allowed them to read sacred texts.
My gosh.
I know. Jerome... That's what Jerome focused on to diss Pelagius is, and he hangs with women and lets them read the texts. So I think Pelagius needs a second chance. I think I would love to go back and meet him and go and sit at his feet and go, dude, they don't get you.
All right. Well, you're winning me over to Pelagius. And also, I like when our guests have an answer that we haven't heard before. So you're winning on two fronts there.
Yay.
What do you think history will remember from our current time and place?
Ooh, I think this is the end of civilization as we know it. I really do. I think this is Margaret Wheatley writes about this and has spoken about it. This isn't a pendulum swing. This is the end of Western civilization as we know it. So buck up, folks, she's saying. It's time to show up for who you are and to offer your gifts to the world. Now's the time, because we're not going back to any of the stability we've known. I mean, that's a very dark response, but ever since I heard her saying it actually, I'm going, you're right. Okay, we're going to remember this as the death of civilization as we knew it. Great potential for something new to be born, but the old is done. Yeah.
Well, and that do not be afraid message, more relevant than ever, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what are your hopes for the future of Christianity at the end of civilization?
I still think the gathering of people around the Christian, what I call the mythic story, the Christian mythic story, is a beautiful life and world transforming thing. Like when Christians can continue to gather, I have to say, with or without the consent of bishops, with or without correct theology, like all of the things that we do to so limit ourselves, the gathering of people around this mythic story that is focused on Jesus, has some specific rituals that engage us, I think is a beautiful thing. And I would hope that survives even when the institutional church doesn't. Even when people have to sell off their beautiful old buildings, thinking this is the end. This isn't the end? Are you kidding? You get a chance to be the church in a way you never could before, meeting in a high school gymnasium on a Sunday morning. Anyway, yeah, something like that.
Yeah, so lots of hopes for the future of the church. Okay, and this last question is really important because you have a lot that you're doing and exploring and writing and talking about. So where can people find out more about you, Brian?
So my website is my name with my middle initial, which is Brian E. Pearson. And on there you can find about my podcast, which is called The Mystic Cave, which is actually talking about all the stuff we've been talking about. It's going to change its focus in this season coming up. Do you know who's going to be my first guest?
Who?
I don't know if you'll know who this is. Some of your people won't know. Jane Siberry from the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
Who was the most unique person.
Life is a red wagon.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
I'm focusing on kind of the soulful questions of what does it mean to be human in the modern age and trying to do it without theological jargon. Anyway, so my podcast is listed on there, my blog, people can sign up for my blog. And of course, I have a page dedicated to the book, which people can buy it on Amazon and all those places, but I'm sure not a fan of Amazon. Not just because I only get $1.20 for a book sold on Amazon. But if people want to buy a book, they can do that through my website, and I'll send it to them signed or with a, dedication, whatever they want. And do that before September 30th. This is, somebody said, the E in your middle name, does that stand for entrepreneur? Because somebody said, you should have a draw. You should have a contest to help sell your book. I think it's a very stupid idea, but I'm doing a draw. So if you buy a book from me before September 30th, well, if you live in Southern Alberta, I'll come to your home and do a house concert. Or I'll meet with your book club and we'll talk about the themes of the book. Or we will have an extended conversation about your own spiritual journey. Those are the first, second, and third prizes, but only till September 30th. And then the deal's off the table.
Brian Entrepreneur Pearson it is.
.ca.
.ca. And the book is Talking to Trees, A Journey into Soul. I highly recommend it. Thank you so much for our conversation today, Brian. And thank you for all of the wisdom and humor and honesty that you bring to your reflections.
Thank you, Martha. And I love the show. I love that you're pushing out at the boundaries. Man, if nobody's doing that, the church is dead for sure. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah. If you're not busy being born, you're busy dying.
Amen.
Bob Dylan. Okay, well, we always end not with Bob Dylan, but with a word of peace. So, Brian, may God's peace be with you.
Thank you. And also with you.
Thanks for joining us on the Future Christian Podcast. The Future Christian Podcast is produced by Resonate Media. We love to hear from our listeners with questions, comments, and ideas for future episodes. Visit our website at future-christian.com and find the Connect with Us form at the bottom of the page to get in touch with Martha or Lauren. But before you go, do us a favor. Subscribe to the pod to leave a review. It really helps us get this out to more people. Thanks, and go in peace.